I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the updated 2022 Lexus ES. The Lexus ES now takes on a bigger role in the Lexus Australia lineup, and that's because the Lexus IS, which I was actually quite a big fan of, has had an untimely death for the Australian market. Stricter Australian design rules and regulations around side impact safety have seen the IS and the RC and the CT removed from the Lexus Australia lineup, but they're far from the only cars to be affected. Also the R35, Nissan GTR, the Alpine A110, the list is actually really long, but what it means is that the ES is now the smallest Lexus sedan. Small is a misnomer, it's basically 5 meters long. Lexus call it midsize, but effectively, under the skin, this vehicle runs on the GAK platform, which is the Toyota Group's midsize front-wheel drive architecture. But as we'll find out in today's video, GAK is what gives the ES really good driving dynamics. This may look like quite a prim and proper mid-sized Lexus sedan, but it's actually remarkably good to drive. Now, the one I've brought along with me today is the top of the tree, the ES 300h Sports Luxury. Quite appealing in this sort of cherry red color. We'll have a look at the interior in a moment, check out the back seats and the boot, discuss the running costs of the ES, which is now available as a hybrid, but also as a non-hybrid 4-cylinder petrol. And then I'll take this vehicle for a drive before summing up my thoughts. Before we get started, hit subscribe below. Jumping into the shade and inside the 2022 ES, there are many components that are familiar, but there's a bunch of things that have been spruced up for this next model year as well. And the main one is right here. The screen is bigger for 2022. It now measures 12.3 inches, but it's also been brought forward towards the occupants, and that's because it now has touch capability built in, which certainly makes it easier to use. There still is the Lexus touchpad down here that some love and some dislike, but I found myself just using the touchscreen this week. Plus, we now have wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so you're still going to need your cable plugged in down here. It's not wireless unlike Audi and BMW, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. In front of the driver, we've got a mix of analog and digital gauges. They look cool. And one interesting thing is that even though this is the hybrid, the digital tachometer doesn't have like a charge meter. It just has 0 through to 8 on revolutions per minute, which goes a long way to making this car feel very normalized. And that's sort of how it is for Lexus now. Hybrid is just normal. And as we'll find out when we take it for a drive, that's pretty much the experience you get behind the wheel. It's so tightly integrated now, this technology. Another new thing for 2022 is a choice of this extended ornamentation. So we now have these wooden inserts in the steering wheel, plus you get trim wrapping around the dashboard, which looks really good actually. Now, this car has a relatively conservative black leather interior. It's really soft leather though, heated and cooled on the front seats. The steering wheel is also heated. And we've got the optional bamboo inlays, which is a little bit more sustainable than regular wood trim, particularly because if anyone's grown up in Australia, they'll know how difficult it is to fight off a bamboo outbreak at home. So at least here it's been integrated into the trim of the car. The other choices though are two very fetching woods. There's a walnut and also a sumi black wood, and they're paired with a mixture of interior colors that include cream leather, hazel tan, and also mauve, which is quite interesting. In terms of other interior components, what really strikes you is just how well made the car is. Really, really tight build quality, no pano gaps really, soft down here where your leg rests, soft on the dash, binnacle, doors, even down below. It's not rock hard plastic. You get a lot more give in terms of soft materials below the belt line than in some rivals. We also have the beautiful Mark Levinson 17 speaker stereo in this car. The bass stereo on the ES is actually fine, the 10 speaker unit, but the Mark Levinson really elevates it further. And one shout out I'll give is actually to the quality of the seals on this car, and you find that in two ways. Firstly, it's incredibly quiet, this vehicle. So the doors are sealed properly, but also the glass is thick, and it's just super relaxing driving down the road because of that. But also, if you're ever on a gravel road, and we've got lots of those here in Australia, and we integrated one of them into our testing for this car, it's insane how smooth, vibration-free, but also insulated from dust. The interior of this vehicle is. It's actually uncanny, and we'll put a shot in here where you can see that seal line just completely stopping intrusion of dust from a gravel road. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's check out the back seat. As I mentioned up front, the particular ES that we're looking at today is the top of the range sports luxury, which gets all of the goodies, but the main thing that differentiates it from the remainder of the lineup is just the quality of the leather. Beautifully stitched, incredibly soft. But we also have this center console that is standard on the sports luxury, which has reclining rear seats, which is very cool. So on the way to the airport or whatever, you really can tilt those back and relax. We've also got heated rear seats, controls for the media, controls for the rear sunshade, which is power adjustable, and a separate temperature zone back here. It's also got cup holders. It's got a flock line space, so things aren't going to scratch around. But you can also option this console on the ES300 Luxury with enhancement package. And that's actually a bit of a Goldilocks spec where you don't have to spend very much at all because it remains the base hybrid, but you can add an enhancement pack that has a bunch of desirable features, including this console. So particularly important if you're a professional driver, but on the sports luxury, you just get this included as standard. Now, I think it could have been finished a little bit better in between the back seats and the boot, which sort of has a lockable compartment to get through to the boot there. But let's just put that out of the way and have a look at the comfort. So for myself at 6 foot, headroom is good. There's sort of a cutaway for the sunroof, so that doesn't disturb. Legroom's enormous. Toe room, slightly constricted, but I do have very long legs. You could get someone in the center seat at an absolute pinch, but this is really better regarded as a very spacious car for 4 adults. We have air vents back here. We've got 2 more USB-C ports, a 12-volt socket, map pockets in both rear seats. We have manual sun blinds to go along with the power blind on the back window. Mark Levinson speakers again, so just a super high build quality back here. It's spacious, and for a luxury sedan that isn't particularly expensive, I don't think anyone would call the ES overpriced. It's pretty nicely appointed here in the second row. Here around the back of the Lexus ES, we can sort of see that coupe-like silhouette that this vehicle has that's quite appealing, and I think it looks really good in red. You probably won't want one in black because they will be confused for a professionally driven car, but Lexus tells us a clear majority of ES buyers are private, which is interesting. As I mentioned, this one's the hybrid, and underneath this powered tailgate is a 473 litre boot, more than enough space for our 3 suitcases. There is a bit of a step down into it, but nothing major. The aperture is pretty good for a sedan, and then underneath that boot floor is a space saver spare. And then you've got a button just here to close that power tailgate nice and easily. And the last step for us before we take a drive is to chat about running costs. What it costs you to run the Lexus ES really depends on which engine you choose. Now, previously this model was hybrid only for Australia, but now that the IS has been discontinued, there are a few reasons why Lexus has introduced a new ES 250, which is the non-hybrid petrol. It's less expensive to buy, but it does use more fuel. We haven't tested it yet, but we're expecting fuel use in the vicinity of sort of 8 litres per 100 Ks. We'll have to wait and see. Now, the hybrid is quite a different animal in that regard. Lexus says that it will use 4.8 litres per 100 on the combined cycle, but in a mixed test we did of the car, we actually managed 4.5, which is a really good result for something this big and relatively powerful. It has 160 kilowatts of power, so it's absolutely no slouch. But it does require 95 octane premium fuel at a minimum. Servicing the ES, that's done every 12 months or 15,000 kilometers. Lexus only caps the price of the first 3 services at $495 a piece for a 3-year total of $1,485. And the warranty on the car is 4 years, 100,000 kilometers, which is now starting to look a little bit ungenerous compared to the Mercedes 5-year unlimited kilometer warranty. So taking off in the updated ES300, gliding away on electric power before the 2.5 litre petrol 4-cylinder engine just gently comes in. Off throttle, engine's out, back to EV. Probably the big takeaway for me when driving any new generation Lexus, or Toyota for that matter, is just how seamless the petrol electric changeover now is. You know, the first, second, third generation hybrids from this company were very frugal, but you could certainly tell the step between the two power sources. Like, I'm driving now with the stereo turned off so you can hear me talk and we don't get copyright strikes. So it's a little bit more pronounced than it normally would be, but if you've even got a little bit of music just playing softly as you drive along, it's basically imperceptible when this car is running on electricity versus when it's running on petrol power, and that is what makes it kind of so appealing for where we're at right now in Australia, which is that EV infrastructure is still nascent. We know that's the direction we're going in. I'm sure if I'm still doing this job in 10 years, reviewing EVs will be an absolutely daily occurrence. But for now, petrol-electric hybrid still is a pretty good way to cut your personal CO2 footprint while actually not having to worry about where to charge up. It still has its appeal if you're a realist, and I tend to be a realist. So mechanically, what are we dealing with here? I've already mentioned there's a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder petrol, and we've got 2 electric motors. And together they produce 160 kilowatts of power. Now, Lexus doesn't quote a combined torque figure, but I've always said for this setup that by the seat of my pants, it feels somewhere around 300 Newton meters combined, which is enough to feel pretty sprightly in town where you've got the benefit of electric torque immediately on throttle. But even on the highway and in the country, you still are getting some of those benefits. And that's because the hybrid system never lets the battery completely run down. So it always has some level of electric power that it's able to throw into the mix. And so one of the comments I see relatively frequently beneath our hybrid reviews is that it doesn't really give you any assistance on the highway or for country driving. That isn't true. You do still feel some electric torque, and the engine does still shut down here and there, particularly when you're coasting or driving slightly downhill. And so the country economy, while it's not as astounding as the in-town economy, is still pretty good. So I did a fast country loop yesterday in this car, actually over several hundred Ks, and still returned 5.7 litres per 100 kilometres. So not quite as good as the 4.5 that biased a slightly urban driving in my previous test, but still diesel-like economy, but with petrol and electric refinement. So pretty tasty mix. Now with 160 kilowatts, it's no slug. It gets along well, and that electric torque just gives it that nice quick boost when you're on throttle. It's certainly not a performance model. There is an ES Sport that has larger 19-inch wheels compared to the 18s we have here on the Sports Luxury. It's also got an exclusive adaptive damper setup, where in the Sport Plus mode it has a noticeably stiffer ride. But even the fixed rate dampers on the Sports Luxury do a really good job of balancing comfort, compliance, control. There's some road feel, partially because we are on 18s, but it's never crashy or unrefined. It's just enough to remind you that Lexus actually does kind of care about driving dynamics now, even in the front drive stuff on this GAK platform that will also underpin the new NX. So if the new NX is as good as this car, then it should be a substantial upgrade on the one that it replaces, much like how this ES was a big step over the previous ES in terms of dynamics. So the ride is a really nice balance. It's not soft and boaty like large Lexuses of old tended to be. Then there's the handling, which is far more capable than most people will require it to be. The steering is accurate and direct. Lexus makes a big deal about the steering ratio being about right, and I agree with them. There's not a huge amount of feel from the front wheels that comes through, but it's very accurate and it's easy to point this car where you need it to go. Levels of grip from the Dunlops are pretty decent, but it's actually the grip from the chassis as a whole that really surprises, and you can bowl down a country road in this car with just a high level of adhesion to the surface, with the whole car kind of working to help you out. It's nice and adjustable, it's comfortable, it's balanced. That's kind of the word that applies to the ES the most, balance. It's really nicely set up, likable, satisfying to drive, and extremely refined. I've already mentioned the seals, which do a great job of keeping out dirt and dust, but they also help to eliminate a fair bit of noise. And this car is very quiet on the highway, allowing you to enjoy that Mark Levinson system. Safety-wise, we've got improved lane trace assist, and it really is improved. That's not just kind of a throwaway line. The logic behind it is smarter, and it's now better at tacking to the center of the lane rather than bobbing. I've tested that, and that claim by Lexus is true. We've also got adaptive cruise, we've got AEB, forwards AEB and reversing AEB across the range, which is great. We've got blind spot monitoring. What we don't have is like a camera-based blind spot monitoring like the Genesis G70 and G80 sedans. That would be a good improvement. So what's missing from this car? Well, no longer an entry-level petrol, because there is the non-hybrid ES250 that we're going to review separately soon, although my suspicion is that the hybrid will probably continue to be the real pick because it's so well sorted, but we'll see about that. You also can't get a V6, so the demise of the IS sedan, which had an untimely death recently here in Australia, also meant the removal of a V6 in a Lexus sedan, because that car had a nice direct injected 3.5 litre V6 that sounded good. It wasn't especially quick, but it certainly sounded good. That's now gone. In some markets you can get that engine in the ES. Australia isn't one of them. The hybrid basically stands in as the warmer engine of the set, and it does a pretty good job of that, to be honest. So those are my opinions of the updated 2022 Lexus ES 300 Hybrid. Frankly, this is just a really easy car to like. It's good to drive, it's comfortable, it uses virtually no fuel, and being a Lexus, it has that reputation for quality and durability that we were sure to test on this week's evaluation. Keen to know your views though, let me know down below this video in the comments. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.